Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rohingya Language Preservation Project online report launch, a very important event given the deteriorating nature of the crises around Rohingya and Myanmar Burma. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Yasmin Ullah, a Rohingya human rights activist. I'm also a poet and author. Currently, I am the chair of the board at 𝒂𝒓𝒄 in Burma and a board member of U.S. Campaign for Burma. To begin, I'd like to first acknowledge that I'm speaking to you all from the shared unceded traditional territory of the 𝒂𝒓𝒄𝒕, 𝑭𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒚𝒂, 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒻, and other Coast Salish people who, among many other Indigenous nations in Canada and the Turtle Island overall, are also facing the issues of cultural genocide and systemic violence at the state level. A word of thanks to our host today from the Fort. The Fort is a sister organization of Fortify Rights. It is a space for human rights defenders and change makers in Southeast Asia, located in central Bangkok, Thailand. The Fort seeks to create community, promote partnership, and encourage engagement. And the Fort also supports the Rohingya Language Preservation Project to host today's report launch. And the event is also live broadcasting via the Fort Facebook. You can visit the Fort social media for further information. Just before we hand this over to our esteemed panelist, and I think that you all would like to hear more from them rather than me, this report is by far one of the most important landmark for the conversation and the discourse around the transitional justice and reparations, in my opinion, and for the Rohingya community. I hope that we will have a very fruitful and meaningful discussion for the steps that need to take place for the Rohingya and ethnic communities across Myanmar to access justice and accountability for the invisible wounds inflicted upon them through cultural genocide. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce all of our panelists before I hand this over to Mayyu Ali, who will be walking us through the report findings and the summary. First, I'd like to introduce Andrea Gittleman. And Andrea is a senior program manager for the Scott Simon Center for the Prevention of Genocide, where she focuses on policy outreach, justice and accountability, efforts for mass atrocities, and leads the center work on Myanmar Burma. Some prior to attending law school, she served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Mauritania, where she managed gender and development programs. She received JD from the New York University School of Law and a BA in Political Science and International Studies from University of Chicago. Next in line is Andrea Hernández. Andrea is an emerging strategies coordinator. She was born and raised in Quetzaltenango. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, in Guatemala. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations from Rafael Landívar University in Guatemala. She studied political science and at UNITA College, Huntingdon, I believe in Philadelphia, and she is fluent in English and Spanish. Before joining Cultural Survival, she volunteered in an educational program for vulnerable children and seniors at Instituto Guatemalteco de Education. And currently she is part of the capacity building team at Cultural Survival, supporting the implementation of women training, exchange gatherings, and Indigenous youth fellowships. Adriana is leading the work around the thematic area of cultures and languages at Cultural Survivals. Next is Matt Smith, and Matt is a co-founder and the chief executive officer of Fortify Rights. Matt previously worked with Human Rights Watch, Earth Rights International, Curry Kennedy of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, and as a community organizer and emergency social workers in the United States. In 2019, he received his fellowship at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And in 2014, he was 2014 Echoing Green Global Fellow. Matthew's work has exposed genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, multi-billion-dollar corruption, and other human rights violations. He's written extensively for the New York Times and Washington Post and Wall Street Journals and many other publications. And last but not least, prior to going to Mayyu, I would like to also introduce Dr. Sasa. Dr. Sasa is the Union Minister of the Ministry of International Cooperation and spokesperson of the National Unity Government of Myanmar and former Myanmar Special Envoy to the United Nations of the committee representing 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, the Union Parliament of Myanmar, Burma. Dr. Sasa is a renowned and deeply respected humanitarian for the last 13 years who has founded Health and Hope's work, which has become a campaign. He has become a campaign manager for the NLD in the 2020 general elections and had been invited by the NLD to take national ministerial post in the new tenure of the government of Myanmar from 2021 to 2026, which was due to it being formed after the coup or the staged coup, February 1st, 2021. And last but not least, we have Mayyu Ali, my dear brother. He is a coordinator of the Rohingya Language Preservation Project and the lead author of the report, First They Targeted Our Language and Culture, Threats to Rohingya Language, Culture, and Identity in Myanmar and Bangladesh. He's a Rohingya poet and author of Exodus and 𝒂𝒓𝒆𝒚. For the last 4 years, he was in the refugee camps, Cox's Bazar, after escaping the deadly crackdown carried out by Myanmar security forces in August 2017, as we've all witnessed it. Currently, he is pursuing his master's degree in global governance at the University of Waterloo. I would like to now hand over to you, Brother Ali. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sister Yasmin Ullah, for your kind introduction. Today, I'm very honored to represent a Rohingya report and the work of a Rohingya-led approach. The title of our report is First They Targeted Our Culture and Language, Threat to Rohingya Language, Culture, and Identity in Myanmar and Bangladesh. It's a 54-page long research report. It's based on Rohingya-led participatory research, and it is conducted between July and December in 2021. The report presents the result from the mixed method research. Data in this research was collected from 148 female participants and 137 male participants, in total 285 individual interviews. We have randomly selected the participants in the research in the refugee camp in Cox's Bazar and on the Bhasanchar Island in Bangladesh. These individual interviews included participants of Rohingya Muslim, Rohingya Christian, and Hindu refugees in Bangladesh. The report details how the former Myanmar governments and the current junta have not only used killing and violence, but also decades of cultural and linguistic repression as it moves toward the aim of destroying the Rohingya people. The government of Bangladesh is exacerbating this repression by banning Rohingya cultural events, closing Rohingya schools, and severely restricting freedom of movement for more than 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. The report provides new and important findings such as Rohingya language plays a critical and central role in Rohingya culture identity. Rohingya language is currently disappearing as Rohingya refugees assimilate to the Bangladeshi context. Rohingya language and culture, which are Rohingya identity, are at risk for the Rohingya population in Bangladesh as our language continues to disappear. Maintaining a distinct Rohingya identity is seen as important to the Rohingya community to increase legitimacy and rights upon return to Myanmar. Preservation of Rohingya language, culture, and identity among Rohingya communities in the refugee camps and beyond is extremely important both for existential reasons and to increase the likelihood of a return to Myanmar with legitimacy and rights. Based on the finding, we have more than 25 recommendations for the Myanmar National Unity Government, the government of Bangladesh, the international community, and Rohingya people themselves. The report calls on the National Unity Government to restore Rohingya citizenship immediately and recognize Rohingya as an official ethnicity, as well as construct and support a Rohingya National Museum for permanent preservation of Rohingya language and culture in Myanmar. The report also calls on the government of Bangladesh to end restriction on cultural events, freedom of movement, and education and employment for the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar and on the Bhasanchar Island. And this is the summary of our report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Ali. Next, just to move things right along, we will go through the interventions from our esteemed panelists first, and that can be key takeaways from today, or something to respond to Brother Ali's brief summary. While after that, we will go into the question and answer, and we will be taking a lot of questions, hopefully, from the participants. So over to you, Adriana, with your interventions, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to acknowledge that I'm greeting you all. Just greeting you in my language. My name is Adriana Hernández, and I come from the indigenous peoples, the Mayagüeche peoples from Guatemala. I'm greeting you from the ancestral territories of the 𝒉𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒚 people in the state of Washington. And I just want to congratulate deeply the team and the efforts of the Rohingya Language Preservation Project and everyone else who was involved in creating the report. In this report, one of the quotes that really stood out to me, it was from a 22-year-old female participant in the awareness session. And she said, your session opened my eyes, and I practice Bangla language with my family at home and also with students in class. So from today, I will be very careful when I speak, and I'm going to ask my family and students to speak only Rohingya. So for me, that's really, really deep and strong, because it's important to talk about the issue of language loss and think about what can we do, and what are some of the concrete next steps that we have to take towards preserving our languages. This report is the first time that this sort of report is being done. And so I think this sets the precedence to continue doing grassroots language work. I truly believe that our languages are essential for maintaining and continue the transmission of our traditional knowledge for future generations. I believe in the sacred and interdependent connection and relationship between the land that we are in, our peoples, our cultures, and therefore, if there is the erosion of our culture, that leads to the erosion of biodiversity in our lands and soils. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Now over to you, Andrea, for your interventions.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you to everyone who has organized this event. Thank you also to Mayyu Ali and the Rohingya Language Preservation Project. The report is fantastic, and I think a testament to the dedication of the group. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this event this evening, or this morning, depending on where you are. I'm speaking to you from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and specifically the Simon Skjodt Center for the Prevention of Genocide within that museum. Museums, of course, are about preserving memory, preserving culture, and so it's with profound respect for the work of this group and the importance of this report that I'm speaking tonight. The work of the Simon Skjodt Center, of course, focuses on preventing genocide, crimes against humanity, other mass atrocities, and genocide, of course, is an identity-based crime. And something that comes across in this report is how the Rohingya were targeted because of who they are. And language is one of the most clear and outward-facing ways of the group showing their identity, showing who they are. Expressions of identity like language, culture, expressions of faith, practices of faith, those are things that are often targeted. A way to deny the identity of the group is to deny, restrict their culture, restrict language. And I think that's something that's been shown in this case. I think this report in particular does a good job of looking both forward and backward regarding the importance of holding on to the Rohingya language. In terms of looking backward, there were quotes in the report about retaining a Rohingya identity, saying this is who we are. People denied who we are, and through this language we can show where we came from and we can define ourselves. It's proof of existence when there were perpetrators who were trying to deny and who continue to deny the existence of Rohingya. But it also looks forward that, upon return to Myanmar one day, that the Rohingya people will be able to show that, yes, they are a group and they came here, and that they were not, from Bangladesh, that they are Rohingya, they're Rohingya people from Myanmar. And so I think that duality, this forward and backward, is something that was so powerfully captured in the report. I think when we just to take a step back and just talk about genocide, language, I think, is one of those things that, as I mentioned, is often targeted because it is an outward expression of a group's identity, but it often isn't discussed because there are, very visible, very violent crimes that, of course, for good reason, can capture our understanding and capture headlines. But I think it's important. I'm so glad that this report and this effort is looking at those features of identity. Because if we look at several years, in Myanmar, we saw that targeting of identity. We saw those early warning signs of genocide. So I encourage us to think about identity-based targeting a bit more broadly so that we can understand the risks that groups face and hopefully can be more effective in preventing them. And I'll end there. Would be delighted to hear from other panelists.
Thank you. Now over to you, sir, Dr. Sasa, for your interventions.
Yes, firstly, thank you so much indeed for giving me this opportunity. Especially I'm so thankful to Brother Ali for making this report possible. I think it's a crucial work, and I'm sure there's a lot of hard work you guys have done behind the scenes. So I just really appreciate, and also I want you to know that you are not just working for Rohingya community. When we talk about cultural identity, it is all about the people of Myanmar, which is multi-ethnicities, multi-culture, multi-language living together. So our diversity, that is the very things that the military have targeted all over Burma, Myanmar, as you all know. So, as you know, the military have the clear policy that they want to execute it, that is based on religious and race. Race means our identity. That means our culture. That means our languages. Yeah, and I think it's just really clear that what are your reports, recommendations that you give to NUG, and we will be giving back again, take it back to our cabinets, all that. And I think it's very important that we remain strong and we do not surrender and we do not give up. And here we stand together for justice, justice for all the people of Myanmar, including Rohingya. And then, as you know, it's we already have positions, policy documents with the NUG towards Rohingya. It's a living document. It is about our commitment. Personally, I truly committed. My commitment is unshakable. Our commitment is unshakable to fulfill this justice for Rohingya people. I think it's just evil and devil and dark that our culture and our languages and the very proving existence of our identity are being targeted. And I truly also believe our language culture came from God. It's not given by anyone, it's given by God. And so no government in the world, or no any authority or no military in the world should never ever be allowed to commit such kind of genocide against our identity. And so I think it just we have the word called crime against humanity, but I think against the culture, against the languages is beyond of crimes. It's actually beyond of, it's a kind of, to me, it's against of humanity, means against of our identity. So I think it's just a very important piece of work that you have done, and for that I salute you and thank you so much indeed for all the hard work. And here today I'm so happy we're joined together with our brothers sisters from Rohingya community, and then Matt and here all Adriana and Andrea, all of you. You all have worked in this area. So I'm here as panelists, but also I'm here as just to listen to you, what you have to say to us. I think there's so much that we can learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sasa. And lastly, Matt, please with your interventions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yasmin. Thank you for that to the other panelists. And my friend and colleague, Mayyu Ali, and the Rohingya Language Preservation Project. Thank you for researching and writing this excellent report. I think we should commend Mayyu Ali and the authors for focusing on cultural genocide, despite the fact that it was excluded from the specific acts of genocide as enumerated in the Genocide Convention. And I think, one point along these lines is that human rights law, including the law of genocide, are tools. And if those tools fail to provide the necessary framework to advance justice with regard to a particular area, like in this case, cultural destruction, then we shouldn't feel confined to the elements of the crime as provided for in the law. And I think this report actually provides a very practical expression of that approach, apart from the very useful and important new findings. I was particularly struck by the presentation of the data, the views and the concerns of the Rohingya community, which of course should be driving action in these areas. And in that sense, I see this report as breaking new ground and building on the body of publicly available human rights documentation on the genocide. And I think it does, it goes without saying, that producing these reports and making them publicly available is difficult work. And the research process is complicated, it's time consuming, and often involves a number of risks that I think the average reader is rarely privy to. So Mayyu Ali, thanks for taking this on, and thank you for the hard work that went into the production of this report. And I also just to add to what others have said, I would like to remind those in attendance that who may not be closely tracking the situation in Myanmar, that the genocide against the Rohingya in Myanmar is ongoing. There are mass atrocity crimes being perpetrated nationwide as well. And, you know, whenever we talk about the Rohingya genocide, very often someone will intervene, whether it's, you know, on social media or in real life. There's often someone who will intervene to remind us that quote unquote Myanmar people are also facing atrocities in this country or in the country of Myanmar. And I think, you know, that is of course true. We've documented serious international crimes throughout Myanmar since our founding, well before the coup and since the coup. But needless to say, it's okay to focus on one and not the other in any given instance. And I think to borrow a point from our esteemed moderator, Yasmin, it's not the sole obligation of Rohingya to include others when discussing what they have suffered. And indeed, given the history of exclusion that the Rohingya people have dealt with for too long, it's much more incumbent, we would argue, upon you know, the many diverse people of Myanmar to include Rohingya rather than the other way around. The Rohingya are an indigenous ethnic population of Myanmar. You know, as Dr. Sasa just mentioned, it's crucial that the Rohingya are not recognized as separate from quote unquote Myanmar people. Though even today, in an age of greater unity than Myanmar has experienced, we do still see this unfortunate view expressed sometimes. And on this note, I do want to take a moment to commend the National Unity Government and Dr. Sasa for his leadership and for taking certain measures, including the policy positions with regard to the Rohingya people. The NUG have committed to ensuring full citizenship rights for Rohingya, as well as accountability for the crimes committed against them. And that's extraordinary, given the history of Rohingya exclusion and persecution. And I think it's a commitment that the NUG should be recognized for. But of course, more could be done. And with regard to accountability, I just want to add also that it was not just the military involved in the genocide. There are civilians in Myanmar who were complicit in the genocide and who are now fighting against the coup. They're fighting in the revolution. We would encourage those civilian leaders who have information about the way in which the genocide unfolded to come forward, to work with the 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒚 and others to do their part to ensure accountability for these crimes, to ensure that this does not happen again in Myanmar. And I think any failure to come forward might risk those individuals being grouped with other perpetrators. And I think the findings, lastly, the findings of this report, the very real risks of Rohingya cultural destruction should really be a driving force for more cooperation to ensure accountability, to ensure the preservation of Rohingya and Myanmar culture as a whole. So thank you once again. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all of our esteemed panelists, and thank you, Ali, for walking us through the report. As I've kind of gone through the report a little bit, the part that struck me was the part about the denial of sense of self. And I think that I, for the most part, grew up with that sort of mentality where, when you destroy a group of people through means of violence, structurally, culturally, and directly, the community really can no longer thrive. And I can see that manifesting in our daily lives in the outlook of how the community is currently struggling with, the grappling of the issues and beyond, the issues of livelihood. And it really prevents us to be able to live up to our potential, especially, when issues are as dire as conditions in Bangladesh, in the refugee camps. The people there are not just deprived of being able to live in their homeland, but also deprived of their sense of self. They're being robbed of that. And the longer the crisis linger, the longer that becomes an issue. I'd like to turn to you, Matt, on the reverse order, for us to basically go into this, a little bit of the accountability side of things. And my question to you is, organizations have been a little bit hesitant to hold Bangladesh accountable for their treatment of Rohingya refugees in the camps. The report calls to attention how the camp conditions, including severe restrictions being implemented by the government of Bangladesh, are contributing to the loss of Rohingya language and culture. Fortify Rights has also documented some of these restrictions as well. Can you speak to this, and what are some of the changes in policy the government of Bangladesh should make to improve the situation?
Thank you for that. Yeah, we have observed that as well in Bangladesh, and I think it's the job of human rights organizations to, of course, excuse me, to remind governments of their human rights obligations. So any international organizations that refrain from doing so in Bangladesh likely feel as though their programmatic work is at risk if they were to speak out against human rights violations. We saw this in Myanmar for many years as well, organizations basically remaining silent with regard to severe human rights violations in order to protect some other aspect of their work. And I think, on this, I would say there is always a way to expose the truth. Organizations intent on staying within the good graces of the Bangladesh authorities can still be a part of the solution with regard to human rights violations. They can still share information. They can still exercise a certain level of moral courage and moral imperative in doing so. And from our perspective, the government of Bangladesh, of course, goes without saying they did the right thing in welcoming Rohingya who were fleeing the genocidal attacks. And of course, the Myanmar military is the primary culprit with regard to the plight of Rohingya. But we certainly can't say that the Bangladesh authorities have a clean human rights record with regard to the Rohingya population. As this new report makes clear, restrictions on education, movement, livelihoods. These are some of the biggest threats to Rohingya culture. And denying youth access to meaningful education is a fast track to cultural disintegration, to cultural destruction. Denying people access to a livelihood is an affront not only to their human dignity, but essentially requiring people to focus on mere survival also threatens culture. And these are things that the authorities can overcome. We've seen other violations in Bangladesh, with regard to 𝒂𝒓𝒔𝒕 Island, mass arrests, extortion, beatings. Many of these issues would actually be solved by government inaction. The ask in some cases is actually not for Bangladesh to do something, but to just refrain from violating Rohingya rights in these ways. And in some ways, the authorities are spending so much time and resources trying to confine, control, or otherwise abuse the Rohingya people. Simply protecting the rights of those in the camps would in some ways make their jobs much easier. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Along the same line, I think there are many actors that are involved in, the issues creating almost. There are many parties, and those are actually powerful actors within the region. And we all understand that the issues stem from Myanmar, and there needs to be solutions that actually spring out of that, of the country, within the revolution movement, within the liberation movement, among all the federalized group, all the ethnic groups. I want to turn to you now, Dr. Sasa, and the question is, ultimately, the language and cultural preservation in Myanmar will depend on securing a future with rights for Rohingya people in Myanmar. What are the next steps the NUG can take or plans to take to ensure that all Rohingya are able to fully participate in the future of democratic Myanmar? And the second part of that question is, as detailed within the report, Rohingya language and culture has historically been attacked by within Myanmar by military, and as Matt has pointed out, civilian government and broader population all are involved. Can you please speak about how the NUG can work or plan to work to preserve the culture of the persecuted communities in Myanmar, especially the Rohingya? Thank you.
Yeah, Yasmin, sister, thank you so much for your questions. And as I said earlier, our commitment to deliver justice for Rohingya people is unshakable. It's that is what are our strong commitments And doing so, the process and step by step, there's a lot of work need to be done. And we have come, I think, I'm sure you all will agree that even though it's just 1.5 years since like we are being in this leadership, if you look at that, given that time, I think we have done everything we can, what we have done in these difficult situations. Just the change of the attitude toward Rohingya. I'm so glad, so pleased that there have been a change of mind towards Rohingya in Myanmar. You know, the first day I remember when I tweet my Rohingya brothers and sisters, you know, I get a lot of, you know, it was not easy. It's, you know, it is not easy. But I think from there we have come a long way, you know, a long way. But we have a long way to go. But our commitment is Myanmar has to be for all the people of Myanmar, including Rohingya. We have made it very, very clear on that. The future belongs to all of us. No, regardless of race, I say, regardless of race, that's very important. Regardless of culture, languages, regardless, that is so important to us. So I think you all will agree that that is our future. That's the most beautiful future that awaits you and me, all of us. So that is our commitment to the future of Myanmar. So now you have begun to work. You know, preservations of culture, language of Rohingya. Oh, it's beautiful. You are doing just truly amazing job. The first step, you are taking the steps. You are not just waiting. You are taking the steps. For that, I really recognize your hard work. One day, when our country become, it's not my country, it's our country. When it became free, you know, that the work that you are doing now will be a kind of really important foundation from where we will take it from here. We'll take it from there. So I think that's just amazing important. That I think that is just really important. So we have got 3 things. Maybe that's how I will explain. First is that we have to end this military dictatorship once and for all. Once and for all. Because they are the enemy of our identity. They are the enemies of our language. They are the enemies of our culture. Wherever you go in Burma, it's the military who is destroying our structure, our churches, our mosque, our language. So wherever you go, Kachin or Rakhine or Shan, go anywhere, you will see this perpetrator called the military of Burma, genocidal military. So first, we need to add together this brutal, inhuman military dictatorship once for all. And second, we have to write together a constitutions of Myanmar based on federal democratic principles. Again, regardless of race, religious, culture, ethnicities, or background. Yeah, we all have to participate. That is our, you know, this Rohingya identity and culture language has to be protected by our constitution, not just by our mouths or work, has to be by constitution. So that's second step. So the third step and the last one, not the least, is building Myanmar into union federal democratic country. Union means we are not one. Union together. It's like marriage. It's like marriage. We have to build together. So that is the 3 things that NUG and all of us have made a commitment, not just lightly. We are doing so with our life. We put our life at risk every day to achieve that goal. So when we say revolution, it's like it's costing our family. It's costing every day. I have to move around. I think it just goes stand under threat. It's just so difficult. But because we see the future is coming, that's why we are doing so. And so what I like to say here, my dear brothers and sisters, we are here together. Together, we will achieve the future. Together, we will make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sasa. I am counting on you, sir. I know that the weight of this responsibility is heavy, but I'm also counting on you to actually carry these reports and these words forward to the NUG, and perhaps we will be seeing some plans of actions sometime very soon, because I think it's incredibly important for a government to actually have plans, especially to actually have a vision and outlook for the future of what it would look like post the coup, post eradication of military. I think it's extremely it's vital for us to actually be able to have our hands in those plans and collaborate with the NUG, hands-on, with full participations of the community, and being able to tell and to basically access the NUG in that sense, that we can craft a plan together for when the country is rid of the military power and its ideology, so that we can actually move to the plans of reparations and rehabilitation and rebuilding together, like you said. So just briefly to move our conversation to a slightly different direction, I'm now going to pose the question to you, Andrea.
Yasmin, I think you're muted. Okay.
I think I've just accidentally muted myself. Just wanted to, address some of these questions to you, as an expert in documentation and in accountability efforts. Andrea, Rohingya refugees that participated in the study from the Bangladesh refugee camps often pointed out that language and identity preservation were important to them because of the fear of returning to Myanmar with a language and culture that had assimilated to Bangladesh culture, that would give Myanmar authorities more justifications to continue persecuting them and restricting their rights, for example, by continuing to label Rohingya as Bengali. Can you speak to how Myanmar authorities have used culture, language, and ethnicity as part of their wider strategy to divide the country and persecute different groups, please?
Sure. And I speak as an American, knowing that there are people in this conversation on this panel who know this history and know this experience so much better than I do. But something that came to mind as you were speaking is this exhibition that the museum has called Burma's Path to Genocide, which looked at the genocide of the Rohingya, but tried to capture the experience of the Rohingya people over a longer period of time, that genocide isn't something that happens in one day or in 1 year, and how did this come about? And when we spoke with Rohingya people who were in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, people in other countries, and what they said was that they wanted people to know that it wasn't always like this, that there was a time when they could speak the language, that they could go to school, that they could work in different positions, and they had leadership within the country, and were very much part of the fabric of the country. And they said, this is a part of the story that's missing, and please make sure that people know. And I think that was really telling, because you can see then over the course of several decades how that identity, that those rights had been chipped away. And yes, it's happened through violent acts, through mass killings and arbitrary arrest and crimes of torture and sexual violence. it's also happened in a way that's perhaps less violent, but just as sinister in terms of changing the way that different people in Myanmar would see the Rohingya people, that they're not fabric of the country. They're foreigners. You know, they're not from here. They're outsiders, and perhaps should be a bit suspect. And then it's a part of a gradual process, but for perpetrators who see a group, in this case Rohingya, as an existential threat to the country, you know, it has to be driven out or it has to be destroyed. That happens little by little. And so I think attacking culture, attacking language, which, as I mentioned, are some of those outwardly visible parts of an identity, that becomes easier to kind of villainize a group. And so I think that's something that we've seen through the course of, you know, some local practices within Rakhine State. We've seen it through various leaders, various officials in Myanmar. And I think it is gradual, and I see it as this arc that had so many points upon which to be interrupted. That, you know, this genocidal campaign was a decades-long process, and there were so many times when it could have turned around. I mean, quite sadly, there are attacks on language and culture in many places. Genocide is very rare. This didn't have to happen, and I think that's what makes it extremely sad and extremely frustrating, I think, for so many of us. But I think what we've seen in terms of the Myanmar militaries, but other actors' treatment of the Rohingya, I think, to your question, Yasmin, really raises a flag about future risks, that if, you know, Rohingya were to return, there would be no guarantees of safety. I mean, especially now, but also even before a coup. And that the systemic, the institutionalized discrimination and violence that the Rohingya have faced, those structures, the structures remain. And it's my belief and the belief of the Simon Scott Center that Rohingya would face enormous risk of mass atrocities. As Matt said, that, you know, they are facing an ongoing genocide. The risks remain for people who would go back, and I certainly understand. But reading the quotes from people in the report about why they feel like they could be again, you know, described or cast as foreigners, or could be threatened in the future.
Thank you, Andrea. I think it's important to also highlight that this is not the first wave of violence that took place, and everything has been gradual, but not for the community. The reason why I've used very colorful language to describe, you know, the experience of Rohingya, because that is how people feel. They feel like they're being robbed of the, you know, of the sense of self and the livelihood that of what could have been within Myanmar. And which is why, you know, it is so important today that we actually have the NUG minister with us and can pass on the message that we really want to see the plans in place for the NUG to actually lay out, you know, the details of what could be done post the coup or post revolution, because those plans cannot exist in a day or two. It needs time to develop. It needs time to be, you know, democratic and participatory. Now turning to you, Adriana, I want to you know, focus on this report. The Rohingya Language Preservation Report lays out, you know, a history of the destruction of Rohingya cultural, you know, patterns and language, basically describing the cultural genocide by the previous Myanmar government and the military, and you know, this continue on to this day by, you know, the SAC of the Rohingya refugees surveyed. In this research, many have said that Rohingya language and cultural preservation was the most important. I think it was like 88% of people, majority of Rohingya have said that this was extremely important. Some have placed that this was more important than our other basic needs like healthcare, food, and shelter. From your experience with the cultural survival, Can you please speak to the importance of language and cultural preservation for persecuted communities and why this is such a priority for these communities globally? Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate the question. So yes, certainly that really resonated a lot with my, the communities that we work, the indigenous communities that we work globally, and with my personal experience as well, that there is a very deep connection of language and identity. And it's because the way we see language is in a holistic way, because it's connected. We cannot really see language as one single aspect of our life, but it's really connected to all of our aspects of life. So I think this issue related to the issue of language loss really needs to be addressed immediately and requires some radical actions in general, just because, as we're seeing, it's a problem that is increasing rapidly in general in the world. 7,000 languages that exist, 40% of the world's languages are at some level of endangerment. And so some languages are already facing extinction or have some level of endangerment. And that's even more exacerbated for communities that are being persecuted, or there was conflict, or there is conflict. So the population that is at risk is not really teaching or speaking the language at home. And like I said, certainly there is a connection between language and identity. And it could be really hard when, in my case, I can say, like, if I lose the language and I know that my ancestors spoke the language, it's really hard to, there are so many emotions that happen, like some shame and some feelings of guilt when you're trying to recover the language again, knowing that your ancestors spoke the language, but you're not really speaking the language currently because of many political factors or external factors. So I believe that really to strive towards the well-being of communities and around the world, we really need to see language as a, holistic way, and really, most importantly, let the communities come with the solutions and creative ways on how they want to preserve their languages and apply, creative ways and culturally appropriate solutions that are going hand in hand with their cosmovisions and the way that we live. Because in many of our languages, that our languages are really connected to the way in which we transmit our oral traditions, our stories and prayers and songs, in many aspects of our cultures in our lives. So when we think about language, we don't really think it as something that's isolated, but it's holistic, it's cyclical, and it's interconnected to all aspects of our lives, including our spirituality and our health. If we don't have the language, it's really difficult for us to be healthy and thriving, and our communities to be healthy and thriving, and being good in regards to our spirituality and our cosmovisions, because we have a really deep connection to the land and the land that we live in through the language. And it's because through the language is how we speak to the land. So that's very important. In general, as an indigenous-led organization, Cultural Survival, which is the organization that I work for, we envision a future that supports grassroots movements and grassroots initiatives, knowing that supporting what works best for the communities in terms of strengthening their languages and keeping their languages alive and thriving. But we really try to accompany the communities, and like we said, just being a facilitator of a space where, multiple actors come together, but really letting the communities be the political actors in making those decisions, self-determined decisions that are centered at the rights-based approach, because the rights, the human rights, have to be at the center of all this.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I really resonate with the comments on, the connection of language, culture to land, because that is a huge part of why we ended up in the situations that we're in. It was not because the language was an important part for the Myanmar military or for other actors to actually destroy first, but it was because of that identity that connect to ownership of the land and agency that was so important to first destruct in order to actually justify the mass atrocity that we've ended up with. Now I want to pivot to you, Brother Ali. There's a lot that has been said today, and my question to you is, can you tell us more about why your community initiated this project, and a little bit about the team that conducted the project, including the significance of it being a Rohingya-led project, and the second question is, because we might not have enough time to go into too many questions, the report has also outlined a number of revelatory findings. Can you please share with us some of the findings from the research that you think are the most impactful and most important?
Thank you, Yasmin. So as I mentioned, as you can hear in my introduction, over the last 4 years I was in the refugee camp in Cox's Bazar. So I witnessed how language was changing over there, So I was visiting a friend when it was in 2018 when I was there, and at whom I noticed he was talking with his little kid in a Bangladeshi local language. And I wonder, even those, so he used to work just in the refugee camp, so there he learned from the Bangladeshi national staff and others, So, and yeah, so my colleague and I discussed on that, so we came up with the project, the idea with the project. So today we are here with the report. So that's the idea. And in the recent years, as Matthew Smith and Andrea mentioned, the majority of attention dedicated to Rohingya crisis has focused on physical violence, destruction, including killing, rape, the burning of villages. However, very little, consideration has been given to the violence that has been taken against the Rohingya language, culture, and identity. For decades, the former Myanmar government and the current junta have undertaken a cultural genocide against Rohingya population, including destroying our language and culture. That is the similar tactic the perpetrator used in the Holocaust and Bosnian genocide. So as for the team, this project is 100% Rohingya-led. There are 23 of us, 11 female peer researchers and 11 male researchers. So I'm the project coordinator. And the team's member included from those who recently arrived during the violence in August 2017, and also those who have been living since 1990s in Kutupalong and nearby refugee camps. So 2 of our staff live on the Basenja Island, where more than 23,000 Rohingya refugees have been forcibly displaced or relocated by the Bangladeshi authorities. And so with regard to the significance of the Rohingya-led approach, we are really proud of what we were able to accomplish. And there are several benefits we contribute to the community. We are expert in our own culture and community dynamic, and we know what the most pressing needs are for the community. As we lead the project, we reflect on the community's priorities and execute tasks in a manner that is respectful of Rohingya culture, in a way that will have maximum impact within our community. The resources dedicated to this project will continue to benefit the community over time, because the knowledge and expertise generated in us will remain within the community forever. Last but not the least, this Rohingya-led approach challenged the idea or underestimation of those humanitarian actors who often cite Rohingya refugees are lack of capacity or low education level. By giving that justification, they exclude the perspective of Rohingya community and exclude us from the leadership and management position in organization. That is what is happening in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. So with regard to some of the very compelling and important finding of our research, I will start by saying that we asked participants about the language used. The vast majority of respondents, 99%, reported that Rohingya was their native language. And 1%, which are Hindu refugee, they reported that Burmese Bangla was their language. So the report finds that most respondents, 86% of Rohingya use Rohingya language mixed with Bangla and Chittagonian language, while 40% use only Rohingya in their daily life in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. To me, it was really impactful when we asked them what their gravest concern in the Bangladesh refugee camp were. 17% of respondents said that preservation of Rohingya language and culture was one of their gravest concerns. That doesn't sound like much until you see that more people rated language and culture preservation as the gravest concern compared to essential concerns such as education, that is 15%, healthcare 12%, and food and shelter 6%. Considering that, it was not really surprising that 98% of Rohingya respondents said that they felt they were currently losing their language in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. And this is impacting Rohingya on a mental and emotional level. We asked an open-ended follow-up questions to participants how the loss of Rohingya language made them feel. Some 38% felt sad, and while 34% expressed being disappointed and hurt or upset. 19% reported worry, anxiety, and fear, and 5% reported feeling anger or frustration. To me, I thought it was really important when respondents had to say about the intersection of language identity and human rights with regard to a future return to their homeland in Myanmar. 61% of respondents thought that they would face more discrimination and conflict in Myanmar if their language changed. 21% thought this change could be used to further denial of Rohingya citizenship. And 12.3% thought they would be deported again by Myanmar government because of change to their language and culture. I want to emphasize here that Rohingya feel that the loss of their culture will contribute to further persecution and discrimination. That is how important this is to our community. Lastly, we asked respondents if they thought it was important to have a permanent Rohingya culture and language preservation center. A vast majority, 90% of respondents said that the idea was extremely important. So these are some of the important findings of our research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's extremely important to note that the center will not be able to operate without, and as we've discussed previously, that there are roles that states play in cultural preservation, in actually rehabilitation, in addressing the effects of genocide that is still ongoing. And through various conversations, and I'm sure that it's true for other advocates as well, that oftentimes, this is a sort of like a back burner type of issues. It's not really focused on. It's not really an issue that people try to bring up to the fore as much as, the direct violence or the physical ones, the ones that are visible. Whereas this is an important, and I think the report has done such a good job in highlighting that it's an important part of our identity, an important part of moving forward. And so I want to actually, before I turn to Adriana, because I think this is a good continuation to what what Brother Ali just said, but I want to remind all of you, our esteemed panelists, I'm so sorry that we have such short time today. I know that we can talk about this for days on end, but we have about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to have to ask everybody to keep their remarks brief. I know it's really difficult, but we can certainly continue this conversation elsewhere. Adriana, I want to focus this question to you. Since we've talked extensively about what the Rohingya community wants and need in order to move forward in terms of meeting these issues of cultural genocide, what lessons can Rohingya community learn from other communities that have been successful in preserving their language, cultures, and identities? Please.
Thank you for the question, Yasmin. So certainly there are several examples of, success stories from other communities that have been persecuted or that have assimilated colonial languages, but this is a special case because, the violence is like very, very vivid and ongoing. So I feel like some examples of actions that other indigenous communities have taken is really get organized and really have very clear that the rights-based approach must be at the center of any activity or any advocacy campaign that they are organizing. So because the thing is, like, it's really not possible to thrive as a community if our language is taken. We have the right to speak our language and we have the right to live according to our culture. So there's so much to be shared, and I think just activities like this one, sharing ideas and sharing knowledge from different perspectives and different communities can be really powerful. I remember that last year we hosted an event, an online gathering with other communities that were really working towards preserving and revitalizing their languages. And, the contexts are very different. Some of the communities are living in the diaspora. Some of them have lost their elders, and they have very few fluent speakers. And so that makes things more difficult. But using the resources that we have available, and that includes technologies, like right now we're all together in this virtual space and using technologies, documentations, and reports, like the report that was prepared, just putting the attention to this issue and really sharing this report and making the world and letting the world know what's happening, what the situation is happening, and through audio and radio, community radio, podcasts, theater. Some of these are like some of the different ideas and some activities that some other indigenous communities have implemented. But of course, this is, the violence is happening. So this is a very specific case. I just want to emphasize the importance of finding allies, people working in the field and doing the heavy lift, and also funding. Funding is so important because if we want to, prepare a campaign or the work that was done for this project and the report, of course, that needs funding. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I second you on all of those comments, especially the funding part. It's really difficult to actually wrestle people to see the importance of this. Fortunately, though, I think that this is a good time to sort of mention that, but we're going to showcase the pictures later on. Myself and Brother Ali have been fortunate enough to actually collaborate with Guba Books, and they're a tiny, you know, a very small publication company that works mostly you know, on the Bangladeshi side, but they're based in the US, and we've been able to actually create some children's book, and that basically captures some of the folk tales, some of the you know, some of the issues that is hard to tell, but we try to imply it in a very, very implicit ways to tell children that there are things that happen, and it can, you know, it can affect people's livelihood and culture. So we're going to show, you know, what the books look like later on, but I think the cultural shift needs to happen as well from our side to actually try to capture as much as possible. But at the same time, I do really agree on the part that we need to try to find allies beyond what is traditionally understood, and really connect to, I guess, brothers and sisters from indigenous communities, more so because they've been so successful in preserving the culture, you know, despite all these violence. Now, turning to you, Andrea, I think we've discussed a lot on, you know, the responsibility and the accountability, and we've talked a lot on the international levels, but we haven't seen much of the mobilization on the level of Myanmar, you know, that we know of, and that we know is possible from other contexts. What are your thoughts on further mobilizing the international community to protect persecuted groups like the Rohingya within Myanmar? How do we push, you know, the movements within?
That's a really good question, Yasmin. And I think behind that question is a lot of frustration, given the enormity of the problems that we've been hearing about for the past hour and a half, that there's still, it's met by insufficient response. And I think something that I think might help is making sure that people know that this is an ongoing crisis. You know, Matt described this as an ongoing genocide. I think that's something that's helpful. This is, you know, genocide of the Rohingya is not something that happened 5.5 years ago. It's not in the past. I think that helps create a sense of urgency. Just thinking about, you know, when we talk about the international community, we're talking about countries that might be on the other side of the world. It's easy to get caught up in crisis response, and after a couple of months, you move on to the next thing. And I think reminding people that it's not over. It's not that Rohingya can safely go back to Myanmar today. I think that's helpful to show that it's very much a present, urgent issue. I think what's been powerful, at least for me, is bringing, you know, Rohingya voices to places where these conversations are happening, to the extent that it's possible. For me, reading a report like this, when I thought you know, through this report as proxy, I'm hearing from all of the people who contributed to this report. I think that's very powerful. I think Rohingya should be leading some of these discussions, and I think can perhaps relay that sense of urgency better than you know, some others might be able to. So I think those are all important. I think it might still be insufficient. It's really hard to break this sense of fatigue, or perhaps frustration, or a sense that things don't matter. But I think by centering the voices, the experiences, the demands of Rohingya, I think that that sense of urgency and the need to do something now, and not to let you know, past failures keep us from acting in the future. I think that would be the only way forward.
Thank you very much. I second that as well. Hence the reason why we're emphasizing the need to have a plan, not just crisis response or emergency response, but really looking 10, 20 years from now, how do we make sure that the community, my cat is making a cameo, looking a little bit more like what you said earlier, like a future forward looking, and not just how do we, end the crisis now, how do we make sure people survive, but people's survival is not just, food and water or basic necessity. It's beyond that. It's identity, it's cultural, it's systemic, it's so many different layers involved. Now I want to focus this question by one of our participants, Brother Pacifist Farouk, who is also a very good advocate on the the preservation and promotion of our culture. He's written poems and many various publications. He's asking, and this I'm going to turn to you, Sir Dr. Sasa. He said, being a Rohingya, I believe our language is on the edge of extinction. What has happened, or how about other ethnic communities like Kachin, Karenni, Karen? Like, how has their language preservation, or how, I believe this is what the question's being asked, how has other ethnic communities basically meet these issues? And there's also, a few other questions, if you don't mind. There's a question that's being raised about, the 1982 citizenship law that the NUG has not really moved forward with regards to it. There's also some confusion regarding the NUG's stance on Rohingya citizenship in Myanmar. And if you can please speak about the current NUG status on this issue. Is the NUG ready to unequivocally state that all Rohingya will be citizens in the future democratic Myanmar without having to go through the verification process? If you could please address that, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Sister Yasmin. Yes. Firstly, again, I cannot make enough emphasize on how I'm grateful to all of you for producing this kind of reports, and it's also for me, I'm learning a lot about from this. I'm learning a lot. So it's all information that we need to know. It's all the information that we need to know. As the leadership in the country, this is something that we really need to know and go back and think about it and plan about it. So I'm very thankful for that. So your question regarding what about other ethnic minority in Myanmar? I belong to Chin Christian, so it's the same patterns of genocidal attack on our culture and language. I speak Mara language. We are not allowed to learn that in the school. No, never. So what happened was that the church, we learn our language through the church. And the sound book in the church, not in the school. No, you cannot. The same for Kachin, the same for Chin, the same for many other people. It just, there's, as you know, Brahmanization in that sense. And Buddhization in that policy. It's a divide and rule based on race and religions, and that means the end with Brahmanization and Buddhization. So we also have been suffering from this cultural genocide and language genocides. So another thing, like they came to our villages, and the army came and destroyed the church, and they crossed and they placed with the flag of the army. Just imagine, that's what happened to us. So I totally understand the way you describe this report, because we have suffered the same thing. It's just that maybe we are not suffering in the same times and the same place, but it's the same genocidal attack, because they know it's our identity. As you know, and Adriana, you're saying very well, like the languages that speak to our spiritual. That's what we use in our family. That's why we cannot thrive community or village or tribe or ethnicities without our language and culture. In a way, it's our culture, our language that make us into a community. That's connection. So they targeted that very basic one. So I think this is all we have suffered. But what I can say in my context is that we preserve our language in the family, actually, not in the governmental way. We preserve as much as possible. I learned my language, how to write and read, not from my schools or any governmental institution, from family and from the church, Sunday school. That's where I learned how to read my language. So that is another thing. So regarding this 1982 citizenship law, we have made it very clear. We will abolish all the law were written by the military dictatorship, including 2008 constitution written by the army. We have abolished. But specific to that 1982 one, that's very important. That's why we are saying again and again, the Constitution of Myanmar that we are going to write. That is in our roadmap, political roadmap that we have clear. Okay, first is eradication of military dictatorship. And the second most important part is drafting of constitution based on federal democratic principles, regardless of race, religion, culture, ethnicity. So that is where everything, all the footprints of the military dictatorship will be abolished there by constitution itself. Right now, what we have constitution is through CRPH process, through NUCC process, we have got federal democratic charter, and that there will be just interim constitution. It's not permanent one, but when we go through transitional period from where we are in revolution period, at that time, that's where I think that's where really all of you, my dear brothers and sisters, you have to be there. We need you there. That has to be there. That's just where we killed it. The constitution of 1982, once for all. Once we bury it, okay, it will never rise again. By constitution, not by document. By constitution, we have to end up there. So that is the plan that we have. So in terms of citizenship, that is also the constitution. It has to be guaranteed. It has to be promised to you by constitution, not by Dr. Sasa or not by NUG or not by it has to be by constitution. So that is where we are looking. So I really believe that we will be made by the help of God, and together as unity, we will sooner end this military dictatorship once for all. That means finish this revolution, and then we sit down together, all inclusive manner, and prepare draft of constitution, for all of you, for Rohingya brothers and sisters. That's where the day you are looking forward. It has to be promised to you by constitution of Myanmar. There will be federal democratic base. So I think that is clear enough for now. But again, I'm thankful to all of you, Rohingya brothers and sisters. The last year when I tweeted, in my first tweet about Rohingya, just to say Rohingya was like a crime. It was like, all of, I feel like, why is that? But now you see Rohingya in all over the governmental document in Myanmar. And I'm so happy what we have achieved together till today. But again, there's so many things to do together. There's so many things we have to go to together. It's not just for our generation, my dear brothers and sisters. It's all for your children, your grandchildren, all the Rohingya brothers and sisters who are yet to be born when we are gone. That has to be by constitution. That has to be promised by constitutions of Myanmar. Permanent one. They will be there for maybe, if they're still there, maybe 10,000 years to come. There has to be that promise there by constitution. So that's where we have to go together. And once again, thank you so much indeed for inviting me today. I'm so happy that we are here together in one page and one commitment. That's for justice for all people of Myanmar, including our Rohingya brothers and sisters.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sasa. I would like to, before I turn to Matt, and I'm so sorry, Matt, we're going to go over a little bit, and my apologies to all participants. We will go into the concluding remarks very soon, but first I would like to give Matt one last question before we go into that. And just to reiterate, I think it is important that we're getting the commitment today from you, sir, Dr. Sasa, and the NUG. And I'm hoping, we can count on you to actually continue to actually bring in the Rohingya in full participation in a transparent manner, but also the constitution cannot come about without the people. So I want to emphasize that it is incumbent upon the NUG and the CRPH and all parties involved, including the NUCC, to actually continue and try to improve ways in which Rohingya can participate, can be included, and can help draft and craft this new constitution to be inclusive of all people. My apologies, I kept muting myself. Now turning to you, Matt. The last question is, Fortify Rights has done a lot of work to promote local human rights defenders and initiatives in the region. What is your reaction to seeing these Rohingya-led initiatives? And do you have any thoughts on how they can be scaled up in the future? And I believe there's another question as well on this same manner. What other things that Fortify Rights is developing for the Rohingya preservation of language and culture? Thank you.
Great questions. Thanks for that. We are believers in the power of participatory action research. I think one message that I would like to share is that for other organizations that may be in a position to move forward this type of work, it is possible. It is powerful, it's effective. A few years ago, we did a project actually with Mayyu Ali and our friend and colleague, Andrew Riley, and several other Rohingya in the camps in Bangladesh. They determined survey questions, they collected quantitative data, and their work turned into a report called The Torture in My Mind, which revealed really shocking data on the mental health crisis faced by Rohingya genocide survivors. That is research that we would not, that the team at Fortify Rights, even with members of our team who are Rohingya, would not have been able to do on our own. And it was much more powerful coming from the community itself. We weren't quite sure for that particular report how to illustrate in photographs or mental health problems, right? Because those problems are internal. And we ended up working with the Bangladesh photographer _𝒚, who ended up photographing the Rohingya team itself and staying true to the participatory model. Each member of the team determined for themselves how they would be photographed. They determined the look, the location, the theme of their own photo shoot. So I'm only sharing these details to make the point that other organizations, for other organizations, participatory action research is possible, it's powerful, it's very effective. In terms of what else Fortify Rights is doing, our team, we have a number of ongoing initiatives. Certainly, accountability for mass atrocities is central to a lot of our work, and that does include information, and it does include initiatives that we hope would ultimately address the destruction of the Rohingya culture. And I think Mayyu Ali, this report today will certainly be of great interest to investigators and prosecutors who are working to ensure accountability, as slow as that process is. And certainly it needs to be improved and it needs to be more efficient. But for all of those individuals who are focusing on accountability, I think that will be a part of it. Other areas, we're on any given day, we're working to ensure the protection of Rohingya human rights defenders and others. That certainly relates to the preservation of culture. But as Dr. Sasa said, we learned a great amount from this report as well. I would just like to thank you, Mayyu Ali and Yasmin, for your excellent moderation today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and I'm actually turning back to you for the final concluding remarks, if you don't mind. A brief one, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just to thank everyone, thank everybody who's been working behind the scenes on this really important project. We are with you in solidarity, and also all the people in Myanmar who are struggling under this oppressive, terrorist, criminal regime. We're with you in solidarity as well. Thank you so much.
We're turning to you, Dr. Sasa, for a final brief concluding remarks, if you don't mind. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, just again, just thank you so much indeed, for all these, very important research that you have done. I should like to say once again that our commitment to justice and our commitment to the future, that we all belong in Myanmar, it's unshakable. We will never surrender. We will never give up until we reach the future. And finally, I just like you to know, dear brothers and sisters in Rohingya community, that you all are always in our thoughts and our prayers. And then the work that you are doing is not only just for Rohingya people. You are doing it for the whole Myanmar and for the whole world, to deliver justice in this injustice world, to deliver righteousness in this very unrighteous world, and to deliver freedom to this tyranny reign in Myanmar, and to bring freedom for all to these darknesses in Myanmar. So just thank you to all of your work. And we are here together. We will go together. We will deliver this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Andrea, final thoughts, please.
I think everything has been said so well. I just wanted to thank Mayyu Ali and the rest of the team for pulling this incredible report together. I'm honored to be a part of the conversation today. Thank you, Yasmin, for the conversation. This has been, I think, very powerful. I'm hoping that the messages from this event will move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andrea. And last but not least, Brother Ali, and if you could please share about the books as well. We can tell the people when it's coming out and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the Rohingya culture and tradition. So Rohingya has a great culture of storytelling. When I was a kid, before going to bed, my grandfather used to take me into his lap, and he used to sing Rohingya folk song, Rohingya folk tale for me, and I would immediately fall to deep sleep, by the melody of his lyrics and vocal, and I still remember his word and the power of his wisdom. So, and even before the invent of pen and modern pen and books, today we have the Rohingya ancestor used to record the context, war, the gesture, and what is happening in outcome, recorded into oral tradition and left them for their children and future generation as lesson or moral. And this has been passing down, from generation to generation in our community. So these are the endless, intellectual properties inherited by our ancestor to us and to all the future generations in the community. So as part of this, and as Yasmin mentioned, yeah, so the book that we have written dedicated to Rohingya children. So it's like a storytelling style. You can see on the screen, Hafsa and the Magical Ring is a very beautiful and inspiring story that Yasmin Ullah bring with us, and it has incredible illustration. So my one is the white elephant. So Arkan is a home of, some of the few white elephant in Myanmar ever discovered. So it's a like a story, So the white elephant is the symbol of, solidarity and unity between the community in Rakhine State and Myanmar. So this story is based on this, and yeah, it's going to be out very, very soon, hopefully in a couple of months. So in this chart, so we already provided the link of the publisher. So yeah, we are looking really forward. And as a closing mark from my side, thank you everyone, and thanks the team of the fort for arranging all these things, and it's really hard work. And you guys are a wonderful teams, and thanks Yasmin Ullah for your incredible moderation. And I'd like to thank all the panelists, and including Dr. Sasa and all the participants and all the two interpreters who are providing the Rohingya Burmese interpretation to our audience. Is very, very incredible. So yeah, and I just want to, so all of my colleagues who participate in this research, they are watching us. So I just want to say a few words to them. You guys are incredible. You guys are so brave, so courageous. You guys did an incredible job, like living in an, unimaginable, restricted environment in the refugee camp, in Cox's and bear a tremendous risk and personal insecurity. So you guys did really wonderful job. So yeah, we really look forward, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Brother Ali. And just a quick note on the book. The book is coming out. There are 4 total books, and it's sort of like a harmony building project with Bangladeshi authors and illustrators, with Rohingya authors. The books are coming out on November 25th. So please stay tuned on Guba Books website. And I believe it will be available on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. So Barnes & Noble's already put up the link for people to actually pre-order. So if you're interested, please feel free to look it up. I would like to reiterate what everyone else have said, that, congratulations to the team on your hard work and immeasurable amount of, our efforts that go into this, that to bring us such an important aspect of the genocide that Rohingya people have experienced. I hope that this is only a beginning. And I think it will be just the beginning for so much more conversation and work that we will do together collectively. And we count on our partners, our friends, allies, and the NUG and various other actors to join us in this, to ensure that transitional justice is reached and accessible to the communities that have just been so marginalized. And thank you to all our esteemed panelists. It's been such an honor to moderate the session and hear such incredible thoughts and suggestions to continue to change the reality of people on the ground in Myanmar and Bangladesh and basically the entire region. I want to thank our host once again for actually, hosting this event and reminding everyone that the Fort is a space for human rights defenders and change makers in Southeast Asia. It is located in central Bangkok, Thailand, and it seeks to create community and promote partnerships and, encourage engagements, among all of us. For more information, please feel free to contact the team. The Fort is available on various different platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm sure we're just counting. You can actually search up the Fort at basically the @ the Fort space. So with that, I'd like to bring the event to a close. thank you very much again, everyone, for joining us this evening, this morning, and this afternoon. I hope you have a great rest of your day for those of you who are in the Eastern Hemisphere, and for those of us in the Western Hemisphere, good night.